25? 24. Week 24. One of my favorite books in the Bible, Vayikra, Leviticus. And this portion is titled Vayikra. Leviticus is the Latin word, the Latin title for Leviticus, and it's all about the priesthood, and that's what it's about. It's about the Levitical priesthood, hence Leviticus. But again, God's name is Vayikra for it. That's the Hebrew, and that means He called. And I love this. It's really awesome because it's He called, and he actually called Moses. God called Moses, but I think of that as it relates to us as priests of the Lord. He called us. And we just left Exodus, or Shemot, and what did we really finish? Like, what was the last, 15 chapters or so of Exodus about? It's about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the parts and the pieces of the tabernacle and what they represented. So Leviticus, here is the tabernacle, Exodus. And why is the reason He gave the blueprint for the tabernacle? To dwell with us, right? Now we're going to move into what it looks like for the activity that's going to happen inside of the tabernacle. Right, so we went from the furniture to the actual worship, and that's where we're going to move into, is the actual worship that was happening inside the tabernacle. And that's right. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Us together as the body are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and these give us beautiful insight into what should be happening into our lives as priests and as the building of what should be happening on the inside. And it's amazing. Again, it's one of my favorite books of the Bible, and I know that's probably challenging for some people, but I take the priesthood that I'm walking into, I try to take it very seriously. And one of the things that we'll discover is these are all about animal sacrifices. And that's pretty archaic today. And I know a lot of you in the room, because you have a heart and love the Lord, you understand that it was a shadow of something, but I think it's interesting. Like, they were offering something alive, something valuable, and something serious. Like, has anybody in here ever hunted? Have you taken the life of an animal? Like, there's something serious about that. If it's not serious, then we have a freedom ministry here. If it doesn't affect you in some profound way, if it then something's off. And I think one of the beauties is the seriousness of our faith. And that's an issue, I feel like, today for a lot of Christendom, is that there's no seriousness, there's no fear of the Lord. You can come any way that you want. And again, in the holy jeans or the, God, just however relaxed you want to. And there's no seriousness in it, right? And you can see it, you can feel it. There may be emotionalism in it. People may cry, and they may, have snot coming and all that stuff, and they may experience something emotional. But it's like, Peter, I believe it was Peter, right, that said, they'll be seeking teachers that tickle their ears, and it'll have a form of godliness, but denying its power. So when we deny the seriousness of of what we're entering into, I think essentially we're denying its power to transform us. Again, to take an animal life and to offer it to the Lord, it will change you, right? It will change you. And isn't that what Millie, beautiful prayer this morning. Like, may the pastor say something that changes us. I mean, this is a sacrifice, for me. And I take it seriously, right? This is an offering to the Lord on my behalf to come and to share a word. And if I didn't take it serious, you guys wouldn't take it serious, and you'd be like, this guy, what's he even doing? Right? If I just came in, it was a bunch of jokes all the time. So, I just say that to say, hey, we need to offer the Lord things that are serious. And, there's a time for all things, and laughing is good. But, these are serious. And again, this is, when we approach these types of things, obviously we're not offering animal sacrifices now. But Paul said in Romans 12, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And it goes back to our service in the Lord, our service to one another, right? Like being late for the service. And I know this is probably confronting, and that's okay. I tend to do that sometimes, Michelle, right? But like when you have this, whatever, happy-go-lucky, like I'll show up when I want to show up. It's not really that serious. Like, in Malachi, the Lord rebuked Israel. You keep your sacrifices because you're just offering the lame. And if the President of the United States called you and wanted to set up a meeting with you, would you show up on time? Probably. So why would we not take that same serious approach with our walk, fellowship with God's people? Why wouldn't we take that kind of seriousness in our, and I don't even like to use the word volunteering. It is volunteering, right? But is it really? Because the Lord's commanded us to serve his body. So is it really volunteering? Or is it obeying God? I love this. I want to read this from Heschel. I'm going to read a couple of quotes from him. Oh no, I just lost my page. That's tragic. I might have to read it over again. It's okay. So I'm going to read a few different quotes. He's talking about, this is particularly the partnership of God and man. So like when we're serving, when we're giving sacrifices, and we're going to break that down, what the word sacrifice or offering is here in a minute. When we're doing this, we're doing this to God and with God, right? We're doing it to God and with God. So Heschel says this, the spirit of mitzvah, or the commandments, that's what a mitzvah is, like a law. It's an instruction, like God, a commandment. God said, do this, right? Like, do this thing. The spirit of mitzvah is togetherness. We know He, God, is a partner to our act. Did you get that?
Can you repeat it?
I can. The spirit of mitzvah, the spirit of keeping a commandment, like present your body as a living sacrifice. It's a commandment. Paul is speaking on the behalf of God, inspired by the Holy Spirit. So that's a commandment. The spirit of mitzvah is togetherness. We know He, God, big He, is a partner to our act. So we're doing it with Him.
Yes.
That might change your perspective a little bit, right?
Yes.
When you show up, if it's greeting, thank you, Stephanie, you're always on time. I appreciate that. But if you show up because you're greeting, like God's with you. When you're saying hello, welcome, it's good to have you here. Like, it's not just the guy that's standing up at the pulpit or whatever preaching that God is with. He's with every member of the body and whatever they're offering. So I pray that shifts our perspective a little bit, right? We're partnering with God. I love this. I was talking to a daughter of the Lord in mine, and she's serving and she wrestling. She's young. She's challenged with it at times. And so I asked her the question, are you doing it for God or with God? Because if you're doing it for God, then you might be late and be okay with that and whatever. You may not take it seriously. Because you think God's full of grace and mercy, and he is. But if you realize you're doing it with him, like, you're not going to waste his time. Does that make sense? Right? So I got a couple other things I want to read. To fulfill a mitzvah is to be in partisan, to enter into fellowship with his will. Partisan means partnership, like, you're in partnership with him. To fulfill a mitzvah, to fulfill a commandment, is to be a partisan, to enter into fellowship with his will. Now, get this, guys. This is not a born-again believer. This is a Jewish theologian of the Tanakh. And, that's something that we can just glean and receive from the Jewish people, religious Jewish people. And Paul says, for their zeal, like, I honor them for their zeal, but it's without understanding. But then the church claims that, a lot of us today claim to have understanding, but no zeal. We shouldn't be lacking zeal. We shouldn't be, it's integrity. And then he says this, the Torah is primarily divine ways rather than divine laws. Right? I keep telling you guys this. It's not really, the law is a really bad translation or interpretation for the word Torah. And I'm actually we're going to look at the root and the definition. We'll just do it now. So the root word is yirah. And it's an archery term. Torah derives from the root, yirah. It's an archery term. Just like sin, kata, is an archery term, so is Torah. Right? Sin, in the Hebrew, kata, is to shoot an arrow and miss the target. Torah is the target. They're connected. So it's not laws. It's a way. It's a divine way. It's a path to walking with God. It's a path of partnership with God. That's what he wants. It's like having your kid mow the grass. You could do it, sure. You could do it better. But you want to teach them how to do it, right? You want to partner with them. You want to tell them, hey, you do it like this. Hold on. Do it like that. And this is how you achieve the excellence. This is how you do the good thing. Right? This is Torah. So Torah is primarily divine ways rather than divine laws. Moses prayed, let me know thy ways, in Exodus 33:13. All that God asks of man was summarized. And now, Israel, what doth the Lord thy God require of thee, but to walk in his ways? So, as I've been saying, God never wanted to just put it on stone for us. Right? Remember way back in Exodus, I think 19, when God was proposing to Israel? He said it actually multiple times, just hear my voice and follow me. That was his intentions, but knowing that man needs something to look at. Something more concrete. He gives us that in his mercy and his love. And it's amazing, right? These words are the Torah. This Bible, right? It is the old covenant, the new covenant. And you guys remember what is a covenant? It's words, It's words that set the parameter. If you just look at it as a contract, there's an aim at it, right? There's a target. The target's relationship. So covenants are literally word parameters, a guide, a way that lead us to relationship. So when we think about it being about relationship, that it's not about some taskmaster telling you to do this or not do this or not do that. It's partnership with him, right? We're in partisan with him to do his will. He has a will for us to do, and he wants to partner with. That's why he made a new covenant, not like the one that he made with Israel when he was a father and a husband to them in the wilderness. He made a new one. I'm going to put my spirit in you, says the Lord. So think about that. How much we are partnering with him. He is inside of us. Paul said, I preach the gospel more fully. It's a hidden mystery to the Gentiles. And most of us in this room, I'm pretty sure, and online, are Gentiles. That certainly didn't grow up, practicing the mitzvahs probably. So, Paul says, I preach the gospel, the good news, more fully to the Gentiles. It was a mystery that was hidden in the ages past, but has now been revealed. And what is the fuller fullness of the gospel that Paul preached? Does anybody, come on, say it. Christ in you, the hope of glory.
Yes.
That's the more fullness of the gospel that Paul preached. That was hidden, right? The prophets, they were looking for the time of this arrival. They knew it was happening, right? They were looking for it. It says, Peter said that they didn't do this for themselves. They were serving us. But they knew that this time of the infilling, of the partnership with God, that he wasn't just going to be on the outside, but that he was going to come inside them. They experienced it in small portions and glitzes, but here we are, right? We have it. So when we do this, when we perform these mitzvahs, when we keep these commandments, it's not about being right with him, right? Only the blood of Jesus could make us right with him. But it's about partnering with him in relationship. Like I say, I've said before, can I live with my girlfriend and not be married and be a Christian? I suppose so, but you can't be a follower of Jesus because he's not going that way. Plain and simple. Can I be in a homosexual relationship and be a Christian? I suppose you could be a Christian, sure, but you can't be a follower of Jesus because he's not going that way. Can I cheat on my taxes and still be a Christian? I suppose you could call yourself that, but you can't be a follower of Jesus because he's not going that way. Right? We could go on and on with these things. On and on with them. So, the point I was making was seriousness. And there's not a whole lot more serious than taking the life of an innocent and offering it to the Lord, or taking think of, what's the most precious commodity that you have? Time. Time. I think the Lord spoke to me one time. I knew this person. They could fast. Man, they fast all the time. They fast and fast and fast as an offering to the Lord, but they were late all the time. They didn't serve. It was easy. They had gotten to the place where it was easy for them to sacrifice hunger to the Lord, because it became to a place where it wasn't even a sacrifice anymore. It wasn't even serious. They were used to it. It was a normalcy for them. But to sacrifice their time, the thing that was valuable, the serious thing, they wouldn't do it. Last night, we were talking about the adventure, for those of you who were here, and Abraham. And the first call of the adventure was to leave everything behind. And then when God calls him to bring Isaac to the mountain and sacrifice him, it was about surrendering everything to God. And, that's the sacrifice. Like it should. I love what David said. I will not offer the Lord anything that does not cost me something. And at the end of the day, God does not desire your sacrifices, but your obedience. I want to see if I can find it in here real quick. I lost my spot now. To the modern mind, religion is a state of the soul, inwardness, feeling rather than obedience, faith rather than action, spiritual rather than concrete. Do you understand that? So the modern even believer today, it's more about, well, I have faith, I have feelings. I have a feeling of faith. Rather than the concrete motion of obedience that proves your faith. Right? Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. But did he just say, oh yeah, God's real? I know God's real. Or did he get up off his tuchus and leave his land and go to the place that God showed him? And it was that act of faith, of obedience. That's why Abraham is the father of faith today. Not, I don't know, I can't think of another name. Bill. Bill's not the father of faith today. Right? Abraham is. Because he moved, he acted. That's our faith is active. And that's the Lord. He wants our obedience. He wants us to follow him. That's what he wanted from the beginning. That's what he wanted on the mountain. At the mountain, that's what he wants now. And yeah, well, let's get into this. All right, and I'm gonna kind of make some points. I'm gonna probably do more reading. So I have a Bible study. I haven't done it in quite a long time, and I actually talked about this last year when I was ending Torah. Was if I should do this Bible study on Saturday instead. So it's I titled it Foundations, the Hebraic Roots of Our Faith. And it's all, God's names, and it's a lot of Hebraic roots. And maybe I'll do that coming up. I don't, it's good to gather during Shabbat, do a study. We'll see. But so I have some pretty good notes that I'm going to read from this section about the sacrifices, because this is what we're going to talk about today. There's 5 major sacrifices. So there's more than 5, but there's like 5 major sacrifices. And we're going to, really focus on them today and look at them, look at how they relate. Right? Obviously, we're not making animal sacrifices today. So it's about how do they relate to us today? How do they strengthen our faith? How do they reveal the nature of God to us, right? That's what we're here for. How does this reveal the nature of God to us? And yeah, so I'll read this, and then I'll probably slide my Bible out of the way and reference my packets here. I should have printed you guys some off. I could have sent them off with you, but I'm not going to read everything from these. Then the Lord called to Moses. So that again, that's the Vayikra. He called. That's where the title comes from. And then the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when any man of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of animals from the herd of the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer it, a male without defect. He shall offer it at the doorway of the tent of meeting, that he may be accepted before the Lord. He shall lay his hands on the head of the burnt offering, that it may be accepted for him to make atonement on his behalf." Hallelujah. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to break some of this down. Okay? So, let me get my little notes here. Again, we're going to, through these 5 chapters, because we're reading today from chapter 1, verse 1, to chapter 5, verse 26. Magali, read chapter 5, verse 26 for me in your Bible. Sandra.
The Kohen shall make atonement for him before Adonai, and he will be forgiven concerning whatever he may have done to become guilty.
She's got a Tree of Life Bible. So she's got verse 26 in hers.
Mine says it too.
Yeah, and Tabitha's got the complete Jewish Bible, so hers says it too. But yours doesn't. My NASB doesn't. It's actually, I think, goes down to like chapter or verse something of, let me look and see here.
Verse 19.
No, verse 7, chapter 6, verse 7 would be the actual ending of this portion.
Isn't there another one in Matthew?
So,
It skips it?
what do you?
I
No,
don't
no.
know.
Let me explain, Stephanie. Okay. So the Torah, the Hebrew version of the Torah, the verses and chapters are different than a lot of our Bibles are. So Magali's is a Tree of Life Bible, so it's kind of a little more towards the chapters and verses of the Hebrew scriptures. Tabitha's again is a complete Jewish Bible, so it's structured in the original. So there's a different canon. You guys remember I've talked about what the canon of scriptures are, right? It's they had many of brilliant men sat and wrestled with the scriptures, figuring out what books belonged in the Bible and what books didn't, and then they became canonized, right? And this was done by guys that were a generation away from the disciples, from the apostles, right? So we can trust it. When they say that Thomas doesn't belong in the Bible, it doesn't belong in the Bible. They knew why. It came much later. And it wasn't right. So they removed it. So, but the ancient Jewish leaders canonized the Tanakh, the Torah and the Tanakh. They made chapters and verses, and then later, as Christians or believers in Yeshua came along, they were recanonized and restructured. That's why it's a little different. But we're going to read through essentially these 5 chapters, and it makes more sense, right? When you realize it's like, okay, so it's five sacrifices, and it's 5 chapters. So it's kind of weird that our Bible cuts one of them off and makes it a new chapter. But it's really the purpose of chapters and verses is so that I can say, hey, go to chapter 5, verse 26, and you can open up your Bible and go there, right? Because we know our Torah scroll upstairs, it's just one big long scroll. There aren't any marks that say, okay, this is the new chapter, and, which can be good and bad. Because it can stop a thought, like it did here, and make a thought seem incomplete. It's the original Greek. It doesn't have commas and periods and things like that, and that actually disrupt our understanding of the Trinity. It disrupts the understanding of the deity of Yeshua. So it's really important to dig in. There's so much to get, and that's, I think, another reason why it's important to always have those ahead of you in your life, and to not be so stubborn to receive something. I mean, if you say, well, God reveals all things to me, you're in trouble. That's a bad thing to say, because he doesn't reveal all things to one person on purpose, right? Because if he did reveal all things to one person, she'd be prideful in all of your ways, right? Like, next thing you know, that's a Luciferian concept. Like, that's a thought process like Lucifer thought. Well, I can be like God, right? Yeah. So, getting back to the word. the word offering, right? Verse 3, for instance, or verse 2. Any man that brings an offering to the Lord. Some of your translations may say sacrifice. Does anybody's translation say sacrifice instead of offering?
Yeah.
Yeah? Who said that? Yeah. Jackie?
No, I was.
It says offering. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some may say sacrifice, but offering, sacrifice, same thing.
Same thing.
Right. It's okay.
Okay. I did wonder about that because you were saying.
Right.
sacrifice.
In the English, right? Sacrifice, offering. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing.
Okay.
That word in the Hebrew is korban.
Come on.
Korban. And it actually means, when you hear the word, let me ask the question. When you hear the word sacrifice, what does that mean to you?
Give up something.
Yeah.
Give up.
Anybody else to give up? So the actual Hebrew definition and Hebrew understanding is to draw near. So you're actually moving things out of the way that you and God may draw more near to each other. So when we begin to shift our perspective, doesn't it change it? Right? It's not a sacrifice. It's moving something out of the way so you can draw near to God. That's what they were coming for, was to draw near, not to give. Yeah, you need to give some things up for sure because they're causing you to further yourself from God. So when you give those things up, I mean, Isaac is a perfect example. And we're going to talk about this whole burnt offering here in a minute, right? The burnt offering. When God called Abraham to bring Isaac as an offering, as a sacrifice, as a whole burnt offering. And those of you that were here last night and tomorrow you'll hear I'm going to talk about Abraham. We're actually starting line by line walking through the life of Abraham. It's really good. Really excited about it. But it's lek lekah, go forth. And God speaks that to Abraham 2 times. Go forth, lek lekah. And he speaks that to him when he calls him out of his home initially. And then he says that same phrase to him when he tells him to take Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice him. And in the Hebrew, it really means go for your own benefit, for your own good. And he says, go for your own good, your own benefit, and bring me Isaac and sacrifice him to me as a whole burnt offering. And again, that's korban. Go forth for your own good, because Isaac, or whatever you're sacrificing, has taken an unrightful place on the throne of your heart that should only belong to me, and it's causing separation. So go forth, give me your son, right? Draw near to me. Now, tell me, drawing near to God, is that for your good? Is that for your benefit or God's benefit? It's for our benefit, right? So this korban, it's much like tithing today, because this is, again, this costs them something, right? This animal, this lamb, this bull, this whatever they were bringing cost them something. They were not, they didn't deal with money as much as they were like an agricultural society. So they dealt in crops and animals. That was, right, the larger flock meant you were richer. You were well off. So it was literally an act of giving them, giving God part of their livelihood. And so when we are giving our offerings and our tithes today, we are giving God part of our livelihood. And it can be so easy for our livelihood to ensnare our hearts and take an unrightful place in our hearts. So when we bring it, it's a korban to the Lord. It's an opportunity to draw near to Him and to make sure that nothing else. I love, my wife, did a meditation a couple of weeks ago, and she said, if you can't give from your little, you won't give from your much. Right? A lot of people say, oh, when I get more, I'll give more. No, you won't. It's a lot easier to give $1 than it is $100. It's a lot easier to give $100 than it is $1,000. It's a lot easier to give $1,000 than it is $10,000. You know? But if you start with $1, it's a lot easier to do the 100. And if you do the 100, it's a lot easier to do the 1,000. You know, it's not about tithing, although it is. It's a valuable principle in our life. Because that's not your livelihood as much as we can be, right? So, korban, to draw near to the Lord. This burnt offering. Does anybody's translation say whole burnt offering? Does it just or everybody say burnt offering? Okay, well, it doesn't matter. So the Hebrew word there is olah. O-L-A-H, olah. And this is awesome, guys. Like, it means to ascend.
To ascend?
To ascend. To go up.
Oh, really?
So your korban, your offering, your sacrifice is drawing near to God. This particular offering, this is the first of the 5, sacrifices that we're going to talk about. The olah is to ascend. And it really, whenever you read about this offering, it usually also says that it was a soothing aroma to the Lord. So I believe 3 of the 5 that we'll talk about today are considered soothing aromas to the Lord. They're gift offerings. And then there will be 2 that we'll talk about that are sin offerings, and they are not a gift of the Lord. They are about atonement. They are about the kippur, the covering of making restitution with God. It's about restoring, and we'll see some interesting correlation of how Jesus fulfilled all these. So at the end of, we'll see Jesus fulfilled them all, right? He did. But I'm going to read some more, okay, from chapter 1. I'm going to go down here to verse 12 and 13. I have it on here, so if you guys want to read in your Bibles, that's good. But I'm just going to read it from the book here. He shall then cut it into pieces with its head and its suet, and the priest shall arrange them on the wood, which is on the fire that is on the altar. The entrails, however, and the legs he shall wash with water, and the priest shall offer all of it, and offer it up in smoke on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering by fire of a soothing aroma to the Lord. So the head, the entrails, all the bits that nobody wants. Those are the parts that God wants. The legs. Those are the parts that God wants. Why do you think he wants those parts? How does this relate to you? What's the prophetic understanding to you today? Right? The head, your brain, your mind, your thoughts. All of who you are, the inner parts of you, right? Like the kidneys and those pieces, those parts in the Hebrew are actually they mean mind, because that's the way it translates. Your inner parts. I mean, scientists today, they wrestle over between the brain and the mind, like they're 2 different things. Your brain is one thing, and your mind is your will and your emotions. It's you. So God wants all of it. He wants your legs. He wants your active participation, like we opened up with his commandments, with his law, partnering with him in life, partnering with him in what we're doing. He wants all of you, the whole burnt offering, every bit and every part. And when we give that to him, it's a gift, and it's a blessing, and it's a soothing aroma to him. When we hold back, when we don't give him everything that we have, right? When we have that little place, and we're all guilty of it, I know I am, that God sees he's picking at it. He keeps putting his finger on it. But we don't want to let him into that place. We don't, because it's going to cost us something. So we want to hold on to that thing, but he keeps like poking it. And he wants in there. He wants it all. He wants it in the deepest places. And when we give it to him, yeah, Magali.
Sorry, Pastor. When I was studying this morning, I was like looking into what you're talking about as far as like the connection, like how it relates to us. And so I went to this like messianic like Torah study. Like I went online, you know. So I was looking things up as far as like definition, and it said that in some traditions, you know, some rabbis kind of relate this to the first commandment.
Love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, right? Like, yeah. You shall have no other God before me. Like, yeah, it's yeah. When it's on the throne of your heart, that's where God goes, right? That's the God in your life. The unfortunate thing is in our brokenness, the God of sometimes of our life is our brokenness. I remember, I had a pretty strong addiction. And I remember, and I've said this before, like, the Lord he was so gracious, right? All these other things he removed, and I was partnering with him. And he started to put his finger in this one place, and I thought, man, I said this to God, like, if I give this up, then what? Right? Like, this has been my life since I'm 12 years old. If I give this thing up, then what? Like, what do I have? And he said, you have me.
Grace is sufficient.
Then we can go. Like, we can go together, right? That's good. And so I want to touch, like, and here's God's mercy, because I want to make sure that in this, that we continue to touch God's nature, right? Again, that's one of the points of the study. Isn't just to gain knowledge, so we know a couple Hebrew words, right? We want to understand God's nature. So if we continue to read on, God actually makes provision. Like, so you can't afford the bull. Maybe you can only afford a sheep. Maybe you can't afford a sheep. Maybe you can only afford a pigeon. You know, a couple pigeons. You can't afford a pigeon? Well, maybe you can only afford a handful of fine flour, right? So it's like, it's not about the what, it's about the everything. Right? It's like it's not giving out of your abundance, it's giving out of your lack. So, and I've said this, like, I can't afford to. You can not afford not to. Right? It's not about you can't afford to. No, you can't afford not to. Like, you need to. I think of Jesus on his way to die on the cross, and he pauses, and he tells his disciples, hey, look at this. And they're stopped across from the offering box at the temple, right? You guys know the story, the widow with her little mite. I mean, think of that's how much it moves God when we're willing to give him everything that we have. The thing that costs us the most is he will pause on his way to the cross and say, look at this. I want you to see this. Like, she's giving me everything. And was it about the giving? Yeah. Was it about the mites? No, it was about the heart of saying, here's all that I have, God. And he said, wherever the gospel is preached, right, she'll be talked about. And that might have been Mary pouring out the perfume, like, It's all related, right? It's about the heart. It's about pouring it all out for him. It's about giving him everything. But it was so touching to him that he paused on his way to hours from the cross, right? Hours from it. It's beautiful. And, we've talked about this before, the smika, right? That's the Like if we read, it would say, well, in verse 4, he shall lay his hand, the worshiper, he shall lay his hand on the sacrifice, and press himself into it. And it's about identifying with that sacrifice. So you guys, you remember the account of where they were smacking Jesus in the face? Saying, prophesy now. This is like that smika. This was that moment that Jesus was identifying with those who he was taking the sins of the world into himself. Those palms hitting him in the head, this was like the smika. They didn't even know it. Right? But they were imparting their sins into Yeshua. And he knew it. He was taking them. He was giving himself as the whole burnt offering. He was giving himself, sort of. But this is that shmika. This is that same concept. And it's interesting because this is the same word that would be used for laying hands on a king and anointing a king. The shmika is done over the priests. God tells Moses to lay his hands on them and anoint them. This is that same concept. It's imparting something into and identifying with. Right? The man of God, Moses, was to lay his hands on Aaron and his sons, and God through him was imparting something into them. So I think I'll move on to the next one. My wife says I do better with outlines, guys. Staying more focused. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. B- is for everybody.
Oh, I thought you meant A, right?
My wife is always right.
Smart man.
She's pretty much always right. She's wise, very wise. So I'll just kind of start off. I'll read a verse or two here, and then I'll just get to my notes. Chapter 2, verse 1. Now, when anyone presents a grain offering as an offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. So we're going to talk about the grain offering, right? So we just talked about the whole offering. Now we'll talk about the grain offering. The grain offering, again, is a gift offering to the Lord. It's a soothing aroma to him. He's blessed by it, and he appreciates it. He loves it. And it's not, because think about it. We haven't read that if you bring these offerings yet, that your sins will be covered, right? Because it's not a sin offering. It's a gift. It's just wanting to, again, it's a korban. I just want to draw near to you, Lord. Like I just want to give you, I want to say thank you. I love you. And I just want to give. The offering is considered a gift offering and can be found, Vayikra, this offering accompanied the burnt offering and was given just to say thank you. So a lot of times, if you brought the burnt offering, the whole burnt offering, you would bring this grain offering with it. Because you were wanting to give the Lord all that you have. Again, this is a soothing aroma to the Lord. This is a minka, and that's Hebrew for voluntary. It's a voluntary offering. It's not a forced. You're doing it because you just want to say thank you and you love the Lord. Now there were 3 prescriptions for this offering. Fine flour, oil, and frankincense. So why does it say fine flour? So fine flour was just that. It was fine flour. The husk was much more sifted. The husk portion, there's no nutrients in it. So it was more valuable. Right? It was more costly. There was more effort and more work into it. So it's fine flour. Just like fine gold or fine china, right? It's better. There's more work more effort, more love, more value in it than not fine. And so it's bringing the best to God. And then oil. Oil was, there could be some challenging things to bring the Lord in the, in the wilderness especially. And frankincense. Frankincense again is another costly, spice, whatever whatever you call that, aroma type thing. Again, none of these were abundant in the oil. Now, another aspect of this offering, no leaven. So it would be a non-leavened bread. One of the interesting things about frankincense, does anybody know what frankincense is? So like what it a lot of times represents? It's kind of a death herb, right? Frankincense, myrrh, it's like, right. An interesting thing about frankincense is that it kills the effects of yeast. It kills the effects of a rising agent. So God doesn't waste anything, right? So he's like, because think about it. Like, Paul is, we're interesting way of our Christendom today, right? It's like, Paul in 1 Corinthians 4 and 5, he's talking about celebrating Passover and bringing this offering to the Lord. And when you do that, do it with unleavened bread. And everybody allegorizes it because he says do it with unleavened bread, not with malice, of sincerity, not with malice, etc., right? And I think it's yes and yes, right? I think it should be unleavened bread, right? We shouldn't celebrate, when we have our Seder in a couple of weeks, there's not supposed to be any puffy bread. It's supposed to be matzah, unleavened bread. The one year anyways, that was stop everything!
I remember that.
Yeah, well, let's forget it. Our beloved people at the event that hosts the event would like us to forget it. So, but it's not the first time that something like that's happened. We do this flourless chocolate cake, and one year it wasn't flourless. But anyways, yeah. People had chocolate on their face like, oh no! But it's interesting though, because you go to places, and they use puffy bread for communion. And it's interesting. It's like, what? That's weird. But it's kind of, I'll just touch on this. Is it okay that I share some historical stuff with you for a minute? Some historical some church history. So there was the West Church and the East Church, right? Which ended up being the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox, essentially. So there was a great schism in 1054 that they totally rejected each other. And it's this weird, it's just like, I think on all sides of Christendom, this continued removal of anything Jewish to the faith, right? So the Catholic Church, the Western Church, they wanted to celebrate Easter on the Sunday after Passover, right? The Greek Orthodox Church, the Eastern Church, said, no, we've got to celebrate Easter on Nisan 14, no matter what day it is of the week, which I'm in that camp, kind of. I mean, we need to celebrate Passover during Passover, right? And then, but a weird thing is the West Church wanted to do it. It had to be unleavened bread. So they wanted to do it the Sunday after Passover, and it had to be unleavened bread. And then the Eastern Church wanted to do it on Passover, but it had to be leavened bread. Oy vey, right? What? How in the world can you? I don't, it just, and yeah, I won't even get into transubstantiation and how anti-Jewish that is, right? But yeah, so these three things had to be a part of the grain offering. This thank offering, and then because there's no leaven in it. Again, this was offered to the Lord, and here it is, 1 Corinthians. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump of dough? Clean out the old leaven, so that you may be a new lump, just as you are in fact unleavened. For Christ our Passover also has been sacrificed. And I love this. Therefore, let us celebrate the feast, not with old leaven, nor with leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity. I think it's interesting. This is Corinthians. The Corinthian church was mostly goyim, mostly Gentiles, right? And so Paul's talking to them, though. He's talking to them about the Passover. He's talking about things in terms of the Passover, and then says, therefore, right? I just put this there to tell you this, right? That's what, therefore, I said this to tell you this. Let us celebrate this feast. What feast? Passover of unleavened bread, yeah. Right? So it's like there's no expectation that we would stop celebrating Passover, that it would become something else. And that's 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6 through 8. He kind of starts in chapter 4 and, goes on through it. Something that couldn't be in it if we continue to read was honey. So you couldn't put honey in it. And the reason that there couldn't be honey in it is because the ancient East pagan nations often offered honey to their gods as a bribe. Yeah. So they would offer, not that you can't eat honey, because honey eating is in the Bible. But they just didn't put it in this offering to the Lord because in the surrounding cultures, they would give honey to their gods as a bribe, to try to bribe them. So God's not one that can be bribed, right? So don't put honey in it. You don't bribe me, right? You can't bribe me. Honey also represents an artificial sweetness. Honey comes from the processing of one material into another through an agent. Right? Honey is processed from one material into another through an agent. It's not giving him a pure sacrifice. Right? It's giving him something that's manufactured, i.e., pollen from a flower through a bee. Right? So it's something that's been remade. I mean, God made the process, but He wants that pure thing. Right? This is a thank offering to the Lord. He wants the pure thing. So no honey could be added. And then if you eat too much honey, what happens? You get sick. Has anybody ever ate too much honey? It's hard. I mean, it's hard just because it's like rich, right? But I know, Michelle, a drop is too much. I'm sorry to hear that for you. Proverbs says this, Proverbs 25, verse 16. Have you found honey? Eat only what you need, that you will not have it in excess and vomit it. Yeah. I know, the Bible's real, isn't it? People want to try to be so proper and prim and all that stuff. I shared this multiple times, right? There's those Christians that, how you doing? I'm good. Everything's great. It's great. You know what Paul said? We don't want you to be unaware that we were so distressed of life itself. We were, and he goes on to talk about that's real speech. That's real talk. You set people up, that are new in the faith and stuff for disaster if they don't think they can struggle with their emotions a little bit. Right? If they don't think they can wrestle and think these things out. It's kind of like people being afraid to question your faith at all.
Right.
Right? Pastor said, "Oh, you don't have any faith if you don't." No, that's if you can't. Anyways, your faith should be strong enough, right? Now, something that is added to this salt, right? If we read Leviticus chapter 2, verse 13, every grain offering of yours, moreover, you shall season with salt, so that the salt of the covenant of your God shall not be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt.
Wow.
So with all these offerings, they usually sprinkled them with salt. They offered them with salt. One thing, salt was very valuable. Like Roman soldiers oftentimes were paid with salt. Did you know that?
They were what?
Paid with salt?
Oh.
Yeah, because it was valuable. You need salt in your diet. You want to know what happens to you if you don't have salt in your diet? You'll die. You got to have some salt. Now, some of us need less salt. Let's talk about that for a moment, right? When Jesus says be salt, he didn't say be salty, by the way. But why salt? There are a couple of interesting things that are happening here with the salt. Most of us know that salt is a preservative and a delicious seasoning, right? So when there were no refrigerators and things like that, they would cure things by salt. And you can preserve it. Pulls all the moisture out and will dry it out, right? So that was like the main thing is you'd put salt on your offering to preserve that covenant. And it gives flavoring. Gives flavoring to our food. Salt was used a lot in the Middle East to seal covenants, especially concerning friendships. I mean, isn't that a lovely concept? Again, what is the covenant that God offers? These covenants are parameters, directions, they're a guide into relationship with Him. He wants to be our friend. I mean, He's God, so we need to approach Him like that can be a touchy place to go, right? Because he is a friend, but he's not that kind of friend, right? He's a holy friend. So they would put the salt on, and Yeshua said, "Yeah, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." So, again, the seriousness by which we offer God these sacrifices, we have to be serious in it. And as I opened up, sprinkling this friendship with Him, we have to be serious in it. We have to be salt. And how does that relate? Why does Jesus say, "You're the salt of the earth"? He calls us to be a salt of the earth because we're the covenant carrying, we're the preservation of God's covenant to the earth. We bring that flavoring of God to people, but it's also up to us. That's why we've got to walk with excellence. That's why we've got to walk in a way. I can't think of his name right now. There was a Catholic theologian of old. He's accredited for saying this, but there's arguments whether he actually said it or not. Preach the gospel everywhere you go, and if necessary, use words. Have you guys heard that before, right? Now you need to use words, but you can use words and your actions not line up. You can walk with no integrity, and you can look just like everybody else, and your work ethic can be less than, and all these things, right? You're not really preaching the gospel that saves, right? So preach the gospel everywhere you go, and when necessary, use words. Your walk talks louder than your talk talks. You need both, but you got to have the walk. And some like younger, people that I know, brothers in the Lord, like get fired from places, and yeah, but how are you working? I know it's because I believe, I love the Lord, and it's like, yeah, how are you working? Because I can tell you right now, I was very expressive when I came to the Lord about my faith to everybody. Stopping projects and praying for people and stuff. And when I went to leave, my boss was like, please, no, don't. So I think, the integrity with which we carry ourselves speaks volumes. And I think that sprinkling of salt. I think, I made a mistake, and I shared this with you before. I was a new believer, got in an accident, and I was driving Uber, and the insurance lady called me, and it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault, but I was scared, and she asked me if I was driving Uber, and I told her no. And like 30 seconds later, I had to call her back. I'm so sorry I lied to you. And she was just like, what? You're calling me back? And I never should have lied in the first place.
Right.
But I don't even want to get into that. I never should have lied in the first place. But it was probably some kind of a witness to her that I called her back, though, and said, I just lied to you. Yeah, she was like, what is going on? This is crazy. And then she extended grace to me, though, for that. And they went ahead and paid for my rental car. She kind of like did whatever she did, and it was a blessing. So we're going to move into the peace offering. That's in chapter 3. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
I have a comment about, when you're talking about the salt, it made me think that it probably wasn't Morton's salt.
No.
Right? And I'm thinking that, I'm wondering if in their area they got the salt from the Dead Sea, which would have been loaded with minerals and.
I mean, at this point, they would have been in the wilderness, so
That salt
probably
can
not.
carry electrolytes,
Sure.
that are, and I'm thinking we're kind of like the electrolytes for the world.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing I wanted to comment on was the bee thing. It just struck me as funny that, no, it was processed.
Mhm.
And it just made me chuckle thinking, and who knows if that bee was out on Shabbat?
Probably was. Yeah, more than likely. Is there somebody? Okay.
So I had a question. When I
Okay.
was reading this, it kind of struck me. It probably doesn't really mean anything, but so as I was reading this, it said that you can select, like an animal from the herd or the flock. So I was just wondering if it just meant like price-wise, like you think like
Yeah.
more of like what people could afford, or
Very much so. Yeah, so the herd obviously would be like cattle, and the flock would be like a lamb or a sheep. Yeah. So it was definitely, it's kind of in that vein. Or if you can't afford something from the flock, then you could do the dove, or the pigeon. If you can't afford that, then you could do like the handful of flour. So yeah, very much God making provision, understanding that not everybody can afford the same thing.
And then I just love the way that, like, I don't know if everybody's version reads this way when you're talking about the salt, but it says, you are never to, and this is in chapter 2, you are never to allow the salt of the covenant of your God to be lacking from your grain offering. I just love the way that reads,
Yeah. Yeah, mine didn't say lacking, but what does it say? The NASB. It says, every grain offering of yours, moreover, you shall season with salt, so that the salt of the covenant of your God shall not be lacking for your grain offering. Yeah.
I'm missing
good.
that verse. It's not it, I'm sorry.
Uh,
13.
Yeah, there you go.
13,
13.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm wrong.
And then I have one more question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's okay.
Because I kind of came with questions as I was reading this before, but
That's good. She did homework, guys. She's raising the bar, y'all.
let me bring the questions to Pastor today. So, as like in my reading and the research that I was doing, it says that throughout the book of Leviticus, only this sacred name, Yahweh,
Mhm.
right, is used in connection with sacrificial offerings.
Yeah.
And it says, this suggests that sacrificial offerings were given to draw us near to experience God's mercy and compassion.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I was like,
Yeah, we don't find his covenant names used, right? Like in Leviticus, it's just, yeah, Yud He Vav He. Yeah, he's never like Lord of Hosts or,
right.
Yahweh Yireh or, yeah, in Leviticus.
Yeah, I just love that because it got me to thinking about what you were talking about, drawing near, right?
Yeah,
And then some people thinking of God like this angry God, right, of the Old Testament or whatever. But this literally explains, like us drawing near to Him to experience that mercy and compassion rather than simply appeasing His anger.
mm-hmm. Right.
And it's like, wow, that's so.
Yeah, that's it's the wrong concept of God if we think it's just appeasing his anger, right? Like that's not what he wanted first. But he's a just God, so even in his mercy, though, because he is absolutely holy and just and requires a standard, he provides the standard. Like Paul says, he is the just and the justifier. I mean, think of that, right? That is not an angry God. That is a God who desires. And I think of this as you were sharing, Magali. It's like, yeah, he didn't attach any of his attributes in Leviticus, only his personal name, right? Because it's not, if it was about his attributes, then it would be about what he could do for you and not just who he is and being our Father and just like wanting us to come to him, right? It would be the daddy who provides instead of just dad, So, yeah, that's good. It's about drawing near to him. I think of the tabernacle as you're even talking, the mishkan, the furniture, the building itself, like that was the means, that wasn't the end. Right? That's the means. These sacrifices were the means. Like it's not the goal. And when I say end, I mean goal. Wasn't the purpose. It's just the means. The purpose, again, goes back to Exodus, back to Shemot 25:8. So I can dwell with them. And then not only dwell with them, then it goes all the way back to Exodus 19, right? Where when they hear the shofar, tell them to come to the mountain. And they didn't. They stayed back. Right? And that's man continues to, because he's all powerful. And it's interesting, it's Islam, right? That's Allah. It's all about his power. And none of relationship. They literally deny relationship with God. And it's all about his power. But the God that we serve, it's about relationship. It's not, his power, yes, he's all powerful. But he's all loving. And yeah, he wants us to draw near to him more than anything. So much that he gave his only son. He gave his son to be all of these offerings that we're talking about right now. He fulfilled every single one of them. And I'm just going to go ahead and go there right now. Like, man has to do it because we're going to talk about like trespass offering and then sin offering. We're going to talk about peace offering or friendship offering. And then we're going to talk about guilt offering. And then we're going to talk about trespass offering. Right? So we went from whole burnt. Here's the structure in the Bible. Whole burnt offering. Right? Giving him all a gift. Grain offering, gift. Peace offering, gift. Which is interesting because it actually, God, the priesthood, and the worshiper all have a part in taking from the peace offering. It's about fellowship. Another name for it, fellowship offering. And then guilt offering, and then trespass offering. So trespass is when we trespass against one another. Right? So oftentimes Jesus did them in that order, the way they're in the Bible. Whole offering, grain offering, friendship offering, sin offering, trespass offering, right? We have to do them the other way.
Yeah.
So we do like trespass, guilt. We come to a place where we feel bad about how we treated people. Maybe God, right? Because how we treat people is how we treat God, right? Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And then we feel guilty. And then we understand the sacrifice that Jesus made when he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Because it's interesting because he keeps saying that they're unintentional sin. When we'll read some of it and it seems very intentional, right? But Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Even those that put him on the cross, right? That were literally there in physicality. Not that we all haven't put him there, but those who were literally there in physicality, like he was saying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." It's just amazing, right? So yeah, it's trespass, guilt. Then we come into fellowship, right? And peace with God. And then we start to thank him. And then we give him everything we've got.
So I think I heard you say you called the burnt offering the whole offering, is that?
The whole burnt offering, the whole offering, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's the whole thing. He wanted every part, except for, and I didn't read this, except for the flesh.
Right.
He didn't want the part of the animal that most of us want. The outward beauty, or the thing that seems to be the tasty, tenderloin, or right? He didn't want any of that part. He wanted the head, the mind, the inside parts, right? And he wants us to just thank him and to do it with sincerity. And he wants, I love this, right? Like we're getting ready to celebrate Pesach, and there's the 4 cups. And the 4th cup is the cup of Hallel. Like God says it in Exodus 6, like this 4th cup is, "I will be your God and you will be my people." It was this cup that Jesus lifted up and said, "This is my body broken for you." Like it was that cup that Jesus became that offering, that this peace offering. Like that is the peace offering, right? This is my body, this is my blood. He became the sin offering on the cross. He became the trespass when he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Right? It's like, but it was during that 4th cup, the Hallel cup, he lifts up, and this, "I am making a way for you to have peace, fellowship, and relationship with God." Man, right? It's like, he came and he gave it all to the Father. The whole thing. He who knew no sin, right? He walked a perfect, sinless life. The whole thing. He gave the head. He did exactly what the Father told him to do in perfect obedience. The inner parts, like all of it, right? Gave the whole thing. It's beautiful. It's amazing. People are missing depths of our faith, right? The foundation, the solid thing that will make you unshakable when you have these questions. It's like, yeah, the digging. I love it. Again, right? The rabbi is a geologist of the soul. He can lead you to the treasure, but you have to do the digging. And yeah, it's so good. The peace offering. Again, this is Leviticus chapter 3. I'll read 1 and 2 here, and 16 it looks like I have on here, so I'll read it all. "Now, if his offering is a sacrifice of peace offering, if he is going to offer out of the herd, whether male or female, he shall offer it without defect before the Lord. he shall lay his hands to Shmika. Again, he's, identifying with that sacrifice at the doorway of the tent of the meetings. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood around the altar. The priest shall offer them up and smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire for a soothing aroma. All fat is the Lord's. Right? So if we were to break this down and go through it a little bit more, we would see, as I shared with you guys, like the fat belonged to the Lord, and then there was a portion of it that belonged to the priest, and then there was a portion of it that belonged to the worshiper. Now the worshiper and the priest, they were called to have a holy convocation, a gathering, and feast on this animal together. So they weren't just supposed to bring it and leave it and walk away. They actually had a portion of it, and they were supposed to share it with those closest to them, with their family. It's the fellowship offering, the peace offering. I mean, that's the peace, right? It's all about fellowship. It's all about, fellowship with God. The Hebrew word is shalem. This word comes from the root word shalom, and it has the same meaning of restoration, wholeness, and peace. Again, a feature of this particular offering was it was for everyone. It was for the worshiper. So when we get to chapter 7, I'll read it here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Chapter 7 in Vayikra, it talks about this particular offering. Now this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which shall be presented to the Lord. If he offers it by way of thanksgiving, then along with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, he shall offer unleavened cakes mixed with oil. This is talking about the grain offering, right? And unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of well-stirred fine flour mixed with oil, with the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving. He shall present his offering with cakes of leavened bread. It says leavened bread. Okay. Of this he shall present one of every offering as a contribution to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offerings, right? So we see a portion is the priest. Now, as for the flesh of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offerings, it shall be eaten on the day of his offering. He shall not leave any of it over until morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a votive or a freewill offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the next day. So it's just saying how it should be eaten. But with what is left over, on the third day it shall be burned with fire. So you see where there's a part for God, there's a part for the priest, there's a part for the worshiper. And this is the only sacrifice that was partaken in this way, where everybody had a portion of it. The whole burnt offering was just God's. The grain offering was just God's. The peace or the fellowship offering, friendship offering, was God's, the priests, and the worshipers. It's beautiful, isn't it? Again, this just shows the nature of God and what He longs for. It's about fellowship. It's about partnership. It's about relationship. Even these sacrifices, yes, it needs to be serious and it needs to require something of you. What real friendship or relationship doesn't require anything of you? And your human relationships. If it's one-sided, it's not a good relationship. It's a tyrant, and those being, used if it's one-sided. Otherwise, there's, reciprocal benefit. Not that God needs us, but He wants us. And that's mind-blowing, right? He doesn't need you. Inside of the Godhead, there was always perfect relationship. Doesn't need you for relationship. but he wants you. You know, your mom, yeah, she, you know, it wouldn't be right if she didn't love you. But God, you know, right, you all heard that. I didn't get to choose my relatives, you know. But God chose you. Chose you and loved you before he knew you. And this is great. I love this Yochanan, John 15:15. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. It's fellowship. It's relationship. So good, isn't it? And I'll just read this. It's on here. Revelation chapter 19, verse 7 through 9. Let us rejoice and be glad and give the glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Then he said to me, Write, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are true words of God. That's the culmination of our faith, is marriage with him. And then returning and reigning and ruling. Oh, it's so good, right? So now I want to get into the guilt offerings. So as I shared, the first three offerings that we looked at were soothing aromas to God. They were gifts. They were all about drawing near to God in a different way. I mean, these are still, even the guilt offerings are still offerings. They're still korbans to draw near to God, but it's about restitution. Right? The other ones weren't about restitution. They were about being already in relationship and wanting just to bless, just to love on. Right? I'm in a marriage with my wife, and on the very rare occasion I buy her flowers just because I wanted to give her a gift, and not because it's this day or that day. Right? We buy each other gifts just because we want to bless them. And that's the concept of these first three offerings. Now the next ones that we're going to look at, they're specifically, again, they're for covering. They're for atonement. They're for kippur. And I love this word kippur. So you guys know, right? Yom Kippur. The Day of Atonement. The Day of Covering. So this word kippur, covering, and the Hebrew actually, it's more like hiding. So you're actually like hidden. And what are you hidden from? You're hidden from the sin that you committed, right? He's covering that. As far as the east is from the west. Like Jesus was our kippur. He was our this sin offering for us, and his blood covers us. So now when the Lord sees us through this kippur, through this atonement, he doesn't see the sin that the blood is covering. He sees you as righteous and holy through the blood of Jesus, right? So those things are hidden. I mean, they're not, but they are. They're covered. And it's just beautiful. So, chapter 4. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, If a person sins unintentionally, right? In any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and commits any of them, if the anointed priest sins so as to bring guilt on the people, then let him offer to the Lord a bull without defect. See that? So the worshiper or the anointed priest, God isn't trying to act like the priest will never sin. He's saying, the priest might sin and bring guilt on everyone because he represents the people to God and God to the people. So look at this. There's personal responsibility, and then there's also leadership responsibility. But everybody's responsible. But it's unintentional. It's interesting. I love that. It's unintentional. That they sin unintentionally. Now, this word for sin, again, I talked about it as kata, and it means to miss or go wrong. It's an archery term, right? It's like you shot the arrow and missed the mark. You missed the target. Some of us won't. We're not even shooting the arrow. We need to shoot the arrow, right?
Right.
Some of us are shooting arrows way too much. And we need to shoot less arrows, right? But I love, God he says, it calls it unintentional. Again, Torah, the root is yara, which means target or aim. So Torah, law, not a very good translation for the word. It's not laws, it's direction, it's guidance, it's a goal. And again, what is the goal? The goal is relationship with God. Here's where to shoot your arrows at, so that you may be in fellowship with me. And if you miss the mark, and you will, I shouldn't say if, when you miss the mark, here's how you are right with me. Now we know Jesus did this for us once and for all. He was our perfect sacrifice, perfect atoning. Kapara, he's a perfect kippur for us, right? But there is this place where we need to still be responsible, though, to confess our sin before the Lord and be clean. This sacrifice is an ask for general forgiveness. The Lord doesn't connect this to a specific sin and says it would be an unintentional sin. All right, I love Psalm 51, verse 5. And why did David write Psalm 51? I'm sure somebody knows. Yeah, because he had slept with Bathsheba and killed Uriah, right? Yeah. But listen to so I was brought forth in iniquity, and in my sin my mother conceived me. Like, nobody in this room was brought forth outside of iniquity. Every one of us. We all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Every one of us. Yes, Magali.
I have a question, Pastor, in chapter 4. I know that you spoke about, like, the parts that God wants, right?
Mm.
So I see that where it says, like, to bring those parts in, to burn them on the altar. And then the other parts, it says to take them outside, right? And
To the ash heap
yeah.
and burn them there.
So, like, is that because that wasn't what he wanted, so they had to take him somewhere else to burn?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the parts that he's wanting, those are the prideful parts. The ones that he's wanting outside of to be burned and outside of the, they're your flesh and your pride, the beauty of, right?
And so then after that, it says to bring the blood, right?
Yeah.
From bull and to the tent of meeting. And it said to sprinkle it. So I see the sprinkling on the altar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this says like to sprinkle it 7 times before Adonai, before the curtain. So I just thought that was different. I didn't know if that had like some type of.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really dug into that. It wouldn't be the same as putting it on the altar, but for some, I haven't dug into that, to be quite honest with you. It's something I'd have to look into. I wouldn't want to give you an answer. I mean, 7's the number of completion, so I can assume that the 7 times has something to do with, completing over the the sacrifice or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, because it's always on the altar, right? On the guilt offering is put. The priest should take his finger and put it on the horns of the altar, So before the curtain, I mean, the curtain would be the veil.
That's
When
like
you
when
read the
priest
curtain.
entered, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it would be before because I can only enter one time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. And yeah, but I know the piece of furniture that stood right before the curtain is the altar of incense. You know, and that's the peace offering, right? Fellowship offering. I'm sure, you know, and I'd just be speculating at this time, but I'm sure it has something to do with the relationship, right?
Yeah, the unintentional sins. I was just
Oh,
wondering, 'cause, like, it said,
where we're
like,
at now, the guilt
Yeah.
offering. Okay, yeah,
yeah, I was just wondering, like, because I know it says it after it says the elders of the congregation are to lay their hands on the
Right.
head of the home. So, like, basically, like the elders that, you know, I guess,
yeah. The leaders were to come and represent the people,
yeah,
right? And to the people's cleansing. I mean, this isn't Yom Kippur though, because only the priests
oh,
would make that sacrifice.
I know.
This would be just a general kind of sin of the people, I guess, you know, because if you read, it says, right, like if the people sin unintentionally, probably like they're complaining and things like that, right? Like they all go astray because we tend to do that, don't we? Tend to follow the majority and end up all going astray. So, yeah, the 7 sprinklings, I'm not sure. Hallelujah. Thank you for the questions, making me think about it. Yeah. I love that, you know, again, he says it's unintentional, and but some of it, we'll read here in a minute, seems very intentional. Now we're going to move into the trespass offering. This is Leviticus chapter 5, again, 14 and 15. I'll read this. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, if a person acts unfaithfully and sins unintentionally against the Lord's holy things, then he shall bring his guilt offering to the Lord, a ram without defect from the flock, according to your valuation in silver by shekels, in terms of the shekels of the sanctuary, for a guilt offering. Now I know they both say guilt offering, but at the root there's trespass offering and like sin offering. Right? So there are 2 types of guilt offerings. Again, sin offering would be sinning against God, which we know all sin is essentially is sinning against God. But trespass would mean I trespassed on you. That would mean that I did something towards a person that would bring guilt upon myself. But again, you know, when you sin against a person, you sin against God. Right? Because that person's created in God's image. And I think if we really took that into consideration, I'm speaking to myself here, that when I step out of line towards somebody, when I say something, think about Moses. What did Moses do that kept him from entering into the promised land? He struck the rock and he actually called the people, you rebels, like you. He rebuked the people. And he acted unjustly towards the people. I think God could have handled him striking the rock, because God still sent forth the water from the rock, right? So I think it was more about Moses trespassing against the people than it was about him, you know, directly sinning against God. So, yeah, God said you're not going to see it. You can get up here and look at it, but you're not going to enter in with the rest of the people. And that's, you know, that's hefty. So I think if Moses would have knew beforehand, like we have the privilege of knowing beforehand. We do, right? These things were written for your instructions. So we have the privilege of knowing beforehand. And I think if Moses, but we still do it, so he probably would have still done it. I think the point, right? Like if we realize, like, no, when we're trespassing against a brother or a sister, we're sinning against God. Like they are created in His image, and He loves them, and they carry a part of Him, especially born again believers. We literally carry His Spirit in us. So when we do it, Lord, help me get revelation of that. Yeah. Jackie, you had your hand?
So I was just gonna, what you said about, what came out of Moses' mouth in anger, frustration, what have you, it just reminds me of a period of time when I was working at Cherry Street Mission and seeing the things I knew did not go with the mission of where I was working. And where I failed and I trespassed against them, I knew what was right. I knew that it should have been different, but it was a great teaching from the Lord that even though I might know it, I had not been called, I had not been sent to correct these people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. I remember personally, Jackie, early in my walk, being here, and there being a leader that was in my life and wasn't acting right, and I knew it, and everything inside of me wanted to confront it, but by God's grace, like somehow or another, in the right times, he gives me the wisdom to not act in my own, so I held my tongue. Now I think there's some times where God does want us to speak up, and we need to learn those times, and we need to be strong enough. And you know what's interesting is a lot of times when he does want us to, we don't want to. Like, isn't it? A lot of times when he doesn't want us to, we want to. And then when we want to, he doesn't want us to,
Yes.
So it's, we've got to learn how to do it. I mean, that's this whole thing of, the Kingdom Concepts class, right? Is, okay. So I was able to restrain and not say anything, and that situation got dealt with. If I would have said something, then I would have ended up being the bad guy. And rightfully so, because I wasn't called to confront that situation, Yeah. And we just trust the Lord, right, that he's dealing with it. And it's good.
Yeah.
We run with it.
May I say one other thing?
Sure.
On top with this? So yesterday, and this other thing happened, almost 2 years ago. I ended up losing the job. So yesterday, in communication with you and Tabitha about, what I needed to do for the weekend and everything, after I'd sent that message to you, I started getting bombarded with other things that were important. And my focus at that time was, I gotta get this done. And then I got that call telling me the person that needed to be here, right? So I'm sitting there kind of in a conundrum, wondering what it is to do. And I heard the Lord say, are you going to put this before me? And immediately it's like, nope. That's when I sent you the text, I'll be there, this is what's gonna happen, Before I left my driveway, you told me she was here, but I already needed to come here for another thing. By the time I got here, the person that I'd been working with, she said, no, I'm gonna be here. And so I was able to go home and do what I needed to do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what would have happened had I ignored that, but I think that it was a kind of a trial for me. I think it was kind of, the Lord trying to see, trying to help
We
me
learn.
see.
We partner with him.
Exactly.
Sometimes we get it wrong. Like, I think, probably from our lives, having people in our lives, that a lot of us are afraid to learn. Because when we do something the first time, like, we're not going to be good at it. we're going to mess it up more than likely. We're not going to nail it more than likely if you're learning something. So sometimes we won't even learn because we're afraid to look like a fool or, afraid to for that costly, whatever it may be. But that's how we learn. We put it out there and risk it. No risk, no reward. And that's a saying for a reason, and there can't be reward without risk. Like you can't offer it, like going back to the offering, like you can't offer something to God without it costing you something. Like you can't give everything to the Lord you can't think that that's going to not cost you anything. Because I promise you, it's going to cost you something. I promise you, if God's called you to something and you start to go after, it's going to cost you something. If it doesn't, then He hasn't called you. That's just not the way God works. I'll say that. Like, that's just not the way that He works. If it doesn't cost you anything, it's just not Him. Because He knows that if it doesn't cost you anything, then it won't strengthen you. It won't teach you. It won't challenge you. It won't grow you. And God is a good Father that wants to challenge you, wants to grow you, wants you to be smarter, wants you to be stronger, wants you to be faster, wants you to be, to represent on the earth. So He's going to call you to these things that are going to stretch you and they're going to be hard for you. And are we ready? Right? We've been called to an adventure, guys. Right? We've been called to an adventure. And where there's an adventure, there's trials and struggles. Let's go. Vamonos. Right? Amen. So this word trespass in the Hebrew is asham. And it means to offend or be guilty. So trespass, I offended somebody. I did something against somebody that offended them. Jesus said, oh, believe, right, in Luke 17. And I know I'm using modern language. Oh, believe, offenses will come. And woe to those who they come through. Right? It would be better if that person, but if your brother repentantly comes to you and asks for forgiveness, forgive him. And then big-chested Peter says, how many times, Lord? 7 times? She said, no. And I love it, though. What are the apostles? What are they recorded saying? Increase our faith. Right. Because you need to know who God is, right? You need to have faith in Him to know that I can continue to release forgiveness over this person, even though they keep doing it, right? Now, and I know I'm getting this isn't necessarily the point of this teaching, but forgiving doesn't mean continuing in relationship. Because sometimes we can't. It may mean that, but it might mean, okay, I forgive you. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. There's you guys know a lot of this stuff that's going on in the charismatic movement. A lot of these leaders being, called out for being manipulative and all this. And this one, I heard this one person, this person did some kind of weird sexual assault on them, more than once. And I'm I walk into a hotel room and you're doing that, you're doing it once. I'm never going to give you the opportunity to do it again. If I'm your subordinate. And so, yeah, forgive them and depart. we think so when as we continue to walk through the story of Abraham, right? He loved his nephew Lot enough to realize, okay, you go that way and I'll go this way. I think, I was talking to my wife. I think there's things that we think we're supposed to do that we're not supposed to do. I think sometimes we think we need to remain in certain relationships because that's what, like, you've always heard you're supposed, like family members, for instance. Because that's what that's what you think you're supposed to do. But I don't know if that's actually what you're supposed to do. I think, sometimes in order to like forgive somebody, you gotta distance yourself. Because if you don't, they're going to keep doing what they've continued to do. And the saying, if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got. So if you keep, what's the definition of insanity? Is to continue to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right.
So if you're expecting somebody else to change, well, change your expectation. Because that's the only thing you can change. You can't change them, and you can't bank on them changing, but you can change your own expectation by saying, okay, I can't expect anything. And I know that was felt like a good thing to say.
Good.
Amen. So again, he calls these unintentional. But I want to read, this is kind of interesting, right? Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, this is Leviticus 6, 1 through 3. Or chapter 5, verses what, Magali? So then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, when a person sins and acts unfaithfully. 5, probably what, like 21, 22, 20? Okay, yeah. Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, when a person sins and acts unfaithfully against the Lord and deceives his companion in regard to a deposit or a security entrusted to him, right? So look at this. He acts unfaithfully against the Lord and deceives his companion in regard to a deposit or a security entrusted to him, or through robbery, or if he has extorted from his companion, or has found what was lost and lied about it and sworn falsely, so that he sins in regard to any one of these things a man may do, ... So, what did I just say? This is in connection with God saying it was an unintentional sin. Robbery, deceit. Do those sound unintentional? They sound very intentional, but God calls them unintentional. Understanding who we are. This is, again, getting back to God's nature, Magali, right? Like, this is God's nature. He's not a tyrant. He knows who we are. He knows how weak we are. And he continues to extend mercy over us again and again and again. And if we could get his nature in us, if we could think like him more and more, right? Because we say, they did it and they knew they were doing it. But God says they did it and they didn't know that they were doing it. Robbery, he calls unintentional. How? Again, Jesus, Luke 24 or 23:34. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. They were shouting, crucify him, crucify him. And he's hanging on that cross, being crucified, and says, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Man, Lord, help us with that, right? Increase our faith. God calls it this trespass unintentional. And if only we could get a hold of that. That's God's nature. And I know I already talked about this, but we'll touch on it again. And we have to do them. Trespass, katarat, the sin offering, shalin, the peace offering, mincha, the grain offering, and olah, right? We do them that way. We trespass, we come to our senses and realize we've sinned against people. And all the while, God said, when they miss it and sin against me by doing these things to somebody, right? So we realize, that was the end of that's where I came to the end of myself. I sat there and I realized, the way I treated people. like the way I was treating the people closest to me. And it broke my heart. It broke me. And then I realized how guilty I was and like the things that I did towards God. And then I asked for forgiveness. I cried out, and then I had this insane moment of peace. And then I said thank you, because I knew, like I could tell I was forgiven. And then slowly, that part took a long time, and I'm still not there yet, right? Giving him the whole thing. Giving him every part of me. The mind, the entrails, the legs, all of it. But Jesus did it the other way. Jesus came, he lived a perfect sinless life for us. Gave himself as the whole thing. Thanking the Lord the whole way. Giving him, obeying him in every possible way. And then created peace between God and man. Became the sin. Right? He who knew no sin became sin, that we may become the righteousness of God through Christ Jesus. And then, said on the cross, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. It's amazing. It's pretty insane. That's why it's the wisdom of God is wiser than the wisdom of man, the wisest of men. And that God's wisdom is so above anybody that if the principalities and powers would have known, they never would have crucified the Lord of glory. And that's the walk we've been called into. That's the same sacrifice that we've been called to examine. I love Peter chapter 2. Paul says that Jesus gave us an example to follow. Peter. And then he begins to quote Isaiah 53, talking about how he suffered for us. So that's what we've been called to do to those around us. Is become that sacrifice to them. Become that offering to the Lord on their behalf. And that's the challenge, isn't it? But I think we can do it. I know we can, because the Bible says we can.